Hey guys, welcome to Braddels Gaming and to finally another video on this channel. A little bit of a different tone and diction to start this gameplay breakdown video, but that is of course because of my 3-month absence from YouTube. It's actually quite funny and ironic at the same time because in my map breakdown video for Simunitions I also started that video in a similar manner with a very similar disclaimer for what was also a pretty long absence from YouTube. So basically, in recent times, I've been away and busy with many things going on around me outside of YouTube. Thankfully, I can discern that all these things have been of a positive nature, whether it's been the privilege to be able to work and not have to deal with any quarantine lockdowns because where I'm living at the moment, there isn't really any COVID-19. Although, as I do say that, we actually just recorded a case in the community, which is not great, but in a way it is a blessing because it means that I can now stay at home instead of having to go to work and I guess produce more YouTube content. I don't know, it's kind of a bad thing and a good thing at the same time, I suppose. But after not having any lockdown for 10 months, our city, our state is going into a 5-day lockdown just to see how things pan out. But, I can't really complain because, in the absence that I have been away from YouTube, I've had some really, positive opportunities and blessings have happened, such as, family weddings or birthday parties or things that have been fun and not dreadful. But I'm not going to really dwell too much on these things because I know how many people are doing it tough in the world right now, and all I really want to do is get back to providing some fun, informative entertainment for you guys through my passion of Far Cry map building. I still love YouTube, love Far Cry, and love connecting and interacting with you all in this space. So hopefully not only can I get back to making more videos and hopefully limiting these long breaks, although in saying that I do think it's good to take a long break from YouTube once in a while just to, just for well-being and that sort of thing. But, hopefully we can also continue to grow this channel into a much bigger Far Cry community. And that leads me on to my next point, which is a massive thank you to everyone that supported the channel in 2020. 2020 or 2020, whichever way you'd like to say it, may have been a sour year for all, but thankfully in relation to this channel, it was the biggest year for us in terms of growth. We recorded a 373% increase in subscribers from 2019, going from 26 on 2020 New Year's Eve to 123 on the eve of 2021. So once again, a big thank you to everyone that subscribed, watched, liked, or commented on one of my videos. But now, without any further ado, let's get on to the long-awaited video release of the gameplay breakdown of my latest map in the Far Cry 5 arcade, although not a very new map as far as new map releases go at the moment, which is Simunitions. I've also got another map in the works which should be released in a couple of weeks' time. Obviously Far Cry's multiplayer is pretty much dead, but I still love creating maps, and as you guys know, my passion is I have a big I have a big focus on multiplayer maps. That's where my passion sort of lies. And so even though the lobbies aren't the greatest at the moment, they're pretty inconsistent in terms of player counts, I still want to keep producing these multiplayer maps. And I think producing maps and content on a game like Far Cry 5, which may not be as relevant as it is or as it was in previous years. Obviously, there's a lot of other games that have been released since, and Far Cry 5 has sort of taken a back seat. As you guys know, it's my passion to keep producing Far Cry content, so I'm going to keep on trying to do Far Cry 5 content, but also do a bit of Far Cry 6, sort of, I guess, what do you call it? Speculative content, in the form of a wish list or that sort of thing. A bit similar to the map editor wish list that I did about 6 months ago. I'm definitely going to release a few more videos like that, and maybe also some discussion videos as well. But even though the multiplayer in Far Cry 5 is pretty much dead, I still think it's important to talk about multiplayer because it can hopefully give you guys and as the community, but also perhaps Ubisoft a good insight into what we want to see, what we the fans want to see in the next Far Cry game as well. I also think that by continuing to produce this Far Cry 5 content, it's going to allow you guys to keep those, I guess, creativity flowing, keep the creativity flowing rather, and hopefully you guys can become better map editors before Far Cry 6 comes out. So when Far Cry 6 comes out, we can really create some solid creations in that map editor when it does release. At least I'm really hoping there is a map editor in Far Cry 6, because if there isn't, I think a lot of us, myself included, are going to be very upset. But now, again, without any further ado, I'm actually going to get into the map breakdown for Simunitions. I kind of went off track there. I'm very sorry about that. But yeah, that's just basically a little bit of an update on the channel that I decided to slip into this Simunitions gameplay breakdown video. But anyways, onto Simunitions. In the map breakdown, I talked about how I created this map with sightlines as a main priority. I really wanted to maximize the number of sightlines on this map to just create a little bit of variety for the player in terms of how they could kill their enemy. So I positioned every asset on this map in a way that would create many different and unique sightlines that players could find and use to their advantage, and at the detriment to the player that they were aiming at. I tried to promote I tried to promote this sense of fear that no matter where you are on the map, you are vulnerable to enemy fire, with only a few positions on the map having a little bit of safety attached to them. You guys may have noticed also that my commentary is probably not the best. I guess that is kind of the side effect when you don't do a YouTube video for 3 months. But nonetheless, constructing the map in this way, I predicted that due to the small scale of the map and the fast-paced nature the players are almost forced to take, that the gameplay as well would also be very fast-paced. And fast-paced indeed it is. The map is super chaotic and is an absolute cluster foxtrot in the middle of the map. Now, cluster foxtrot, I'm sure it probably has more than one meaning, but it is a military slang term that you guys should definitely look up, at least if you are above the age of 15, because it does have a little bit of a non-kid friendly term sort of attached to it, but I'm sure some of you probably already know what I mean by cluster foxtrot in this military slang term of context, but also in terms of this map, especially if you played it. But if you haven't, I'm going to explain what that term means very, very soon in a more so kid-friendly sort of way. So what I mean by cluster foxtrot in the middle of the map is that it results in this kill box that really only benefits the team that is smart enough not to push too heavily into the other team's spawning area. Because as soon as you enter this area, you're basically killed in an instant, and your chances of survival are very close to none. Unless, of course, you can somehow sneak through there before the enemy team gets there, which means you probably have to rush there as soon as you spawn in at the beginning of a match. Now, that is, of course, tip number one, not necessarily rushing to the middle sort of, I guess, building structure on the map, but rather not to push too heavily into the other team's spawning area. Because basically, if you do, you're basically going to be surrounded, and also if you push too heavily into their area, chances are they've set up a wall of machine guns in their hands across the doorway entries on either side. And if you enter that doorway, it's of course very narrow, and you're going to be shot from pretty much like 5 different places at the same time. So tip number one, if you do happen to play this map, of course, like I said earlier, with multiplayer not being that popular among multiplayer circles anymore, Far Cry 5, these tips might not be that relevant, but I still think it's important to talk about gameplay strategy in a multiplayer map, whether it's a map that I create through this series, my own custom map series, or a community creations episode where I show you guys a multiplayer map. I still think it's important to give you guys gameplay strategy sort of tips, because I believe it gives you guys and myself a better appreciation of how multiplayer maps have been structured up by the creator. And so this is something I will continue to do in these episodes and any other multiplayer maps I feature on this channel via This series or my Far Cry 5 community creation series as well. Now, of course, before I get too entrenched into these gameplay tips, I'm going to continue on with the formula that I usually do for these gameplay breakdowns, and that's to start with the pros, the cons, and then after that, I normally do gameplay tips, but of course I've already done one, so I will return to two more gameplay tips I have in store for you guys in relation to this map a little bit later. But what are the pros? Well, I've already briefly mentioned it, and that's that the map has done what I intended for it to do. It is this fast-paced, all guns blazing sort of haven that has a variety of sightlines all over the map that the player can utilize, and this increases the replayable value of the map. The fact that the map is symmetrical and small means that replayability can be hurt, but the actual fact with this map is that because of the high number of sightlines players have, it becomes a pretty explorative map in terms of trying to find new ways to kill the enemies on this map every time you play it. Secondly, despite the map's small and symmetrical scale, I really think I've nailed the aesthetic for the map. There's enough detail on the map to suggest a military sort of context, the fact that this is set within a United States military base somewhere in the Middle East. I think I've done a pretty good job in terms of creating a realistic sort of setting or keeping true to the setting of a military base in terms of the types of assets that I've placed on the map. And I think I've detailed it in a way where it looks detailed enough that it satisfies this aesthetic without overcluttering the map and causing collision amongst the player's movement, which for a fast-paced map would be pretty detrimental and not very smooth. So I think I've done a pretty good job in this department. I also really enjoyed creating the custom structure in the center of the map that you can kind of see the gameplay rolling over now. That was a bit of a challenge despite the small scale of the structure. I'm not very experienced with generic shapes, and so even though it is a very small structure, it was still pretty difficult to put together, and just to get the dimensions of it correct to create a sort of claustrophobic type of, I guess, narrow pathway for the player that would, I guess, create a lot of chaos in the center. Although I'm shortly going to get to a con, and it is actually on that same structure, but I'll build towards that a little bit later after the third con. Of course, I've still got a few more things to talk about in terms of the aesthetic, and that is I think I've really made the map quite interesting in terms of the environmental settings. In terms of the larger world, I've tried to create a variety of, I guess, views outside the map that make the map feel a little bit more interesting for the player, but also I really think I've done a good job in terms of the fog settings and the effects, the wind effects that I put on the map to suggest that it's a Middle Eastern type of territory. Moving on to the third pro, and that would be that this map can be played in any sized lobby. Whether you just want to have a 1v1 with your friend, this map is small enough that you guys aren't going to be spending the whole time trying to look for each other. But at the same time, in a full lobby, it has enough cover and buildings and interest points along the map that is going to justify you having a good time also in a full-size lobby. Either way, it's going to be pretty fast paced and it's going to be a fun time trying to explore all the different sightlines and sort of ways that you can find to kill the enemy, whether it's that small gap that you find when you climb the pile of junkyard cars. There's a little bit of a small tip there for you guys to consider. Uh, but yeah, it's a really fun map to play in a full size lobby or in a small lobby as well. I think most of the gameplays that you see in this video are in mid-sized lobbies of about 8 people, so a 4v4. But now moving on to the final pro of Simunitions, and that would be the spawning. Designing and building a map of this size can often lead to extreme complications surrounding spawning, especially in relation to the age-old gaming debate of how to quell spawn killing in first-person shooter multiplayers. But thankfully I was able to find a really simple solution for the spawning in this map, which is honestly nothing that new. What I did is add 9 red or blue spawn points on either side of the map, and 2 shared spawn points on either end of the middle zone where the 3 main structures stand. 2 at the prefab military training building, none at the central prefab military training building, but another 2 at the ruins on the opposite side of that middle sort of elevated zone that you guys find yourself traveling to get towards the opposing team. This means that should one team push really hard into the opposing team's initial spawning area, the team that would usually be stuck in an endless spawn trap will now spawn along the middle area of the map, giving them a fair chance to recover and remain satisfied with the map product. The addition of lots of cover throughout the map also helps to support players spawning in, as even if there is someone attempting to spawn kill them, the combination of Ubisoft's spawn protection mechanism and surrounding cover around the person's respective spawn point should ensure a safe return back into the battlefield. Moving on to the cons, and that would be the center of the map. Like I mentioned earlier, the center of the map being the custom structure that I'm pretty proud of. Despite its small size, it was a pretty big challenge to put together for someone such as myself who isn't really that experienced with generic shapes and custom buildings. But nonetheless, this is actually a major flaw in the flow of the map, in my opinion. I think that whilst this central structure creates a lot of the chaos and fast pace that is associated with this map in the form of narrow claustrophobic pathways that each team has to use to get to the opposing team's side, I definitely wish I made this structure a little bit bigger to allow gunfights to take place more smoothly within them, and also to allow a really good transition area, but also a really fortified defendable point that both teams would really gravitate towards and really want to hold down. I feel a lot of people are very hesitant to enter this custom structure because they know how narrow and claustrophobic it is, and they know that if they enter it, them being very smart players, that their chances of survival are not going to be that great. So they stay outside the structure rather than entering inside it. And so I definitely think that if I made this custom structure just a little bit bigger in terms of the width, and in terms of allowing a little bit more open space within this custom structure, would just invite more people into it and really allow the map to flow a little bit better. I also think that the way that you get to the second story of this custom structure through the ladders on either side of the custom structure can be a little bit confusing for players, and so maybe I could have added some signs just to indicate where you need to go to get to that elevated position where the SAS, wait, no, not the SAS. Oh man, oh no, I remember now, the Spaz 12 super shotgun is as a pickup. Now that was a pretty big con, and so I only have one final con, or a second con, on this map, and that comes in the form of the loadouts. I really should have changed out the SA50 with probably the MS16 instead, as this would suit the faster paced style of gameplay this map is renowned for. Instead, I was a bit stubborn and I decided to keep the SA50 sniper inside the map, which probably isn't the greatest weapon to use, just putting that out there, because obviously you need a weapon that's going to be fast firing to be able to combat other players on the map. Although you do get a D50 with this class, and that was kind of the way that I balanced it out, but I still think adding the MS16 instead of the SA50 would have been a slightly better option. And another thing to do with the loadouts that I could have improved is just to add one smoke grenade per loadout, because I think that, well, at least when I was testing this map, when I was throwing the smoke grenades within the map editor testing feature, the smoke grenade was creating these really thick sort of dust clouds on the map that looked really cool. But in actual multiplayer, the smoke grenades don't work, and I think that the reason for this is a glitch that if you have too many smoke grenades on the map in terms of too many smoke grenades per player, so I've got the maximum of 3, I believe it is, It just means that the smoke grenade won't really work. So I probably should change it. I should probably go to the map editor today on my console and change it to just one smoke grenade per loadout, per person, so that it creates these really thick sort of dust clouds. So it's really going to aid players in terms of being a little bit more tactical with how they play. And just give them a much better smoke screen to be able to retreat from areas or advance through areas as well. But otherwise, that sums up finally another video and gameplay breakdown on this channel, this time being on my latest map, Simunitions. I hope you guys enjoyed my return video, including what was some very shaky commentary at times and heartbreaking show-stopping gameplay from Simunitions. Again, I thank you guys so much for the continual support on this channel and community that we are creating here. 2020 was the biggest, most positive year in terms of growth on this channel, and I remain fully optimistic that we can replicate and go even further in 2021. If you think this is the map for you, and you can somehow find a multiplayer lobby to play this map on, then I definitely wish you luck in that avenue and hope you have as good as times as I have had playing on this map. As always, be sure to like and comment on the video, and subscribe and hit the bell icon for future channel notifications if you're new around here. But otherwise, I'm Braddels Gaming, I'm signing out now, and remember to have yourselves a great day.